Sometimes the real poison doesn't come through your mouth. It walks through your front door. It doesn't look like food, but like a friendly visit, a casual conversation, someone who claims to love you, yet slowly drains your peace. After 50, your home should be a refuge, not a battlefield of constant tension. And yet, the people who hurt you the most often don't yell, don't hit, don't insult. They're just there, every day, draining your energy, planting guilt, twisting your decisions. Today we're going to talk about those invisible presences that wear you down from the inside. There are 7 types of people who, if you don't learn to recognize them, can turn your later years into a bitter routine without you even realizing it. And I promise you, the last one, the quietest, is also the most dangerous of all. My name is Gabriel, and if this topic already made you think of someone, stick around. Because this video isn't just a warning, it's a guide to help you take back your space, your peace, and your sense of direction. Have you ever felt like someone is blaming you without saying a single word? Like every time you see them, something inside you tightens, as if just being there means you owe them some invisible debt. They don't yell, don't demand, don't ask for anything outright. But somehow, you always end up giving them something: your time, your attention, your comfort, your explanations. That's the most dangerous trap of all. And that's where this path begins, with the eternal victim who feeds on your guilt. Maybe you've known them for years. It could be a relative, an old friend, even one of your children. There's always a complaint, an open wound, a new misfortune to share. And without realizing it, you become their emotional nurse, their constant support. Not because you want to, but because you feel you have to, as if carrying their sadness were a way to redeem yourself for not doing enough in the past. But stop for a moment and ask yourself this: are you really helping, or are you being used? Epictetus once said, "No one can make you feel guilty without your consent." And yet, when someone knows how to strike that nerve in you, the one tied to remorse, duty, misunderstood love, they can manipulate you without raising their voice. It's like a guest who settles into your home, not with shouting, but with long silences, heavy looks, and lines like, "Don't worry, I'm used to being alone," or "I know you've got more important things." And there you are again, rushing to comfort them, invite them, justify yourself. What starts as compassion ends up as servitude. I remember a woman who wrote to me from San Antonio. She told me her younger sister, ever since they were orphaned, had taken on the role of the permanent victim. Decades later, now both in their senior years, that sister still used the past like emotional currency. "You were always the favorite," she'd say. "You got the chances, I just got the leftovers." Every phone call was a one-sided therapy session. Every visit ended in tears, reproaches, and days of silence if things weren't said just right. "Gabriel," she wrote to me, "I don't know when living with guilt became my routine, but I've realized it's stealing my life." And yes, that's exactly what happens. Because the eternal victim doesn't want to heal. They want to stay in that place because that's where they hold power. As long as you feel guilty, they're in control. And you, who may have already given everything you could, still believe it wasn't enough. But here's a truth few dare to say. Helping someone should never mean destroying yourself in the process. Real love doesn't demand permanent sacrifice, and it certainly doesn't require you to stay trapped in someone else's past. Seneca said, "Life is like a story. What matters is not how long it is, but how well it is told." And you're here to tell your own, not to star in someone else's emotional ruins. This isn't about becoming indifferent or cutting all ties. It's about learning to see clearly, to recognize when a connection is built on guilt rather than mutual love. Because when a relationship survives only out of fear of disappointing someone, it's no longer a relationship, it's a prison. I want you to think about this. If you could look at your life from the outside, like peering into a house, which spaces are occupied by people who are only there to collect emotional debts? How many of your decisions are truly yours, and how many are dictated by that voice saying you owe them? Because as long as you keep feeding that eternal victim, you'll keep putting off your own freedom. And believe me, freedom at this stage of life is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Because the time you have left deserves to be filled with people who lift you up, not wear you down. Respect begins when you stop feeling guilty for protecting your peace. And that, more than any apology from the past, is the bravest act of love you can give yourself. If guilt ties us to the past and turns us into servants of other people's wounds, manipulation disguised as kindness chains us to the present without us even noticing. And that's the second major issue ruining the lives of many people, the charming manipulator who never shows their true face. This kind of person is one of the most insidious presences you can have around you. They don't raise their voice, don't argue, don't act aggressively. On the contrary, they show up as help, as company, as someone who only wants what's best for you. But behind every gesture, every favor, every seemingly kind word, there's a hidden agenda, a silent expectation of something in return. The problem is, when you choose not to give them what they want, their real face shows. Passive-aggressive remarks, feigned disappointment, punishing silence. The charming manipulator doesn't need to shout to make you feel like you've let them down. All they need to do is create an emotional debt. And at this stage of life, when you're trying to regroup, seeking peace, clarity, purpose, the debt can feel like an invisible chain. Because you, who have given so much to your children, your partners, your friends, are used to giving. And when someone shows up with smiles and care but is really seeking control, your generosity becomes their fertile ground. Marcus Aurelius said it with brutal clarity: choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. But how do you choose not to be harmed when the blow doesn't feel like a blow, but like a hug? That's where Stoic discernment becomes vital. Good doesn't always come wrapped in soft words. Sometimes what looks like help is really a way to emotionally domesticate you. The charming manipulator wants you to believe you'd be worse off without them, that you need them, that their presence is indispensable. But the truth is, you already know how to walk on your own. You just need to remember. I've seen this so many times in women who write to me from all over the world. They tell me about a son, a daughter-in-law, a neighbor, even a priest or therapist who became a figure of control in their lives. Always with a smile, always with advice. But little by little, they started to feel like they couldn't make decisions without guilt or self-doubt. Gabriel, one woman from San Diego, wrote me, "I don't know when I started asking everyone for permission just to live the way I want." That sentence says it all, because that's what the charming manipulator does. They plant insecurity in the name of love. And you, who are only seeking guidance, end up asking for permission just to exist. From little things like how you dress or how you spend your money, to deeper matters like the kind of life you want to live. Your home, which should be your space of freedom, becomes a monitored territory. Every visit, every call, every suggestion is loaded with expectations that shrink your spirit. And this is where your spiritual dimension comes in. Because listening to advice with humility is one thing. Living under emotional blackmail is something else entirely. God, your conscience, your inner faith, none of them call you to be obedient. They call you to be free. The voice that guides from above doesn't impose, doesn't manipulate, doesn't make you feel indebted. True wisdom pushes you to grow, not to depend. That's why I'm telling you today, open your eyes. Not everyone who stays by your side does so out of love. Some stay because as long as you need them, they hold power. And you weren't born to beg for direction. You were born to find it. And at this age, after everything you've lived through, you're not here for emotional games dressed up as help. Next time someone offers you something with a smile, ask yourself, does this come with freedom or with conditions? Do I feel stronger after talking to this person or more confused? Because if every encounter leaves you feeling smaller, more afraid, more dependent, then you're not facing a friend, you're facing a trap disguised as kindness. The serenity you're seeking isn't built on poisoned favors, it's built on clarity. And that clarity begins when you stop being grateful for what holds you back and start valuing what sets you free. So far, we've seen how poison can enter disguised as need or kindness. But there's another kind of presence that poisons quietly, without noise, without argument, without any obvious intent. It's like smoke slipping in under the door. You don't see it, but it still chokes you. This is the third point in our video, and here's where things start to shift, because now we need to talk about the professional pessimist who pollutes the air. The person who, every time they open their mouth, reduces the world to inevitable ruin, who sees problems in everything and possibility in nothing. And if you're not careful, their voice becomes your own. One of the greatest traps in aging isn't physical or circumstantial, it's in your language, in how you start to talk, to think, to interpret everything around you. If you're constantly around someone who recites tragedies, betrayals, crises, diagnoses, and the darkest headlines, your spirit begins to shut down like a flower without sunlight. And the dangerous part is that at first it seems normal. You tell yourself, they're just venting, I need to be patient, I know how to filter it out. But over time, you realize you're struggling to breathe. And it's not the air, it's the emotional atmosphere they've built around you. Seneca once said, misfortune that's foreseen is easier to bear than disaster that catches you by surprise. But that doesn't mean living in constant alertness or fearing the worst. It means being prepared with calm, not narrating life as if you're already losing. Sustained pessimism isn't wisdom. It's a form of surrender dressed up as insight. And there are people who choose to live in that space, not because they want to see the truth, but because they're too afraid to hope. Here's the thing, you can live with someone like this for years without realizing that their worldview has become your own. That you no longer make plans, no longer trust, no longer feel excited. And you justify it by saying you're just being realistic, when really, you're just poisoned. That's why the strategy I want to offer today is radically simple. Start choosing your words like they're seeds, not to sugarcoat reality, but to protect your inner soil. Every time you catch yourself saying something negative, pause. Ask yourself, am I saying this because it's true, or because I've said it so many times I can't tell anymore? That pause can shift the course of your entire day, because language doesn't just reflect how you think, it shapes how you feel. Think of it like a closed room. If someone walks in every day and leaves a bit of smoke behind, eventually you won't be able to breathe, even if you crack a window now and then. You have to decide whether that person gets to keep coming in. You don't need to confront them, but you do need to set distance. Choose short visits, neutral spaces, firm responses, and above all, choose not to absorb it. When they tell you everything's going wrong, respond with silence or with calm. Don't reinforce their outlook, because if you stay clear, they won't be able to cloud you entirely. If this message is resonating with you and you want to go deeper into how to live with more purpose and serenity at this stage of life, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit like, so this message can reach more women who, like you, are waking up. Tell me which country you're watching from, and if this reflection speaks to you, write the phrase, "I act with wisdom," in the comments. There are still important lessons to uncover, and believe me, the last one might just be the most revealing of all. Let's keep going. When you start clearing the air in your home, filtering what you allow into your mind and heart, It's only natural that you begin to see other spaces more clearly too. Spaces you used to avoid looking at. Because it's not enough to keep out what pollutes from the outside, you also have to take a closer look at who still occupies the center of your life with a level of authority they no longer deserve. That brings us to the fourth point in this video, where we meet a figure many recognize but few dare to name. The silent judge who never forgets your mistakes. This person doesn't need to say much to make their presence felt. A glance, the tone they use when commenting on your choices, the silence that lingers when they disapprove, it's enough. There's someone close to you, maybe even someone you love deeply, but being around them always feels like you're being evaluated. You find yourself waiting for a word of approval, a nod of recognition, and when it doesn't come, which it rarely does, you're left feeling like you've fallen short. The hard part is that this kind of dynamic isn't always conscious. You may have learned to tolerate it so young that you can no longer tell whether the discomfort you feel in their presence is a warning sign or just how it's always been. This trap is subtle but devastating. When you allow someone to constantly judge you, even silently, you're handing over the steering wheel of your life. You adjust, explain, hold back, just to avoid their disapproval. And you do it even when you know their judgment isn't fair, that they don't truly understand your life, that they weren't there in your most private struggles. But the power of the silent judge doesn't lie in their truth, it lies in your story. In what you've believed about yourself for years, that you have something to prove, something to fix, something to make up for. Stoic philosophy teaches us that other people's opinions are none of your business. And yet, how many decisions have you delayed out of fear of what my sister will say, what my daughter will think, what my neighbor might comment? It's not just hurt pride. It's the echo of a life lived chasing external approval. And the older your soul gets, the more you realize how absurd it is to keep waiting for a pardon that's never coming. Because the silent judge doesn't want to forgive. They want to stay above you. They need you to keep doubting, keep asking for permission, keep measuring every word. And what happens when you live like this? Everything you do, even the good things, loses flavor. Because it doesn't come from you, it comes from their gaze. Your autonomy becomes decorative. You make choices, yes, but always with one eye on how they'll be interpreted. And little by little, your life becomes a series of defensive moves. You don't live, you defend. You don't move forward, you negotiate every step. You don't express yourself, you edit every gesture to avoid another silent verdict. But here's the most liberating truth you can embrace right now. No one has the right to judge your path if they haven't walked beside you through your deepest pain. And no one, no matter how close, has power over your soul unless you give it to them. Living at this stage of life also means declaring emotional sovereignty. It means choosing, consciously, who gets to stay in your life, not because of blood or history, but because of how they make you feel today. Peace doesn't come when everyone understands you. It comes when you stop begging to be understood. If you recognize that silent judge in your life today, you don't need to confront them with words. You just need to take back the authority they never should have had. When you realize your worth doesn't hinge on their approval, you'll see that figure shrink. Not because they've changed, but because you no longer need them to validate you. And that's where your true freedom begins. We've reached the fifth point in this journey. And if up to now we've talked about people who make you doubt yourself, who burden you with guilt or poison your view of the world, now it's time to look at something more physical, more everyday, but just as invasive. Because sometimes it's not about what someone says, it's about what someone does with your space, your time, your daily energy. Today, we need to talk about the emotional intruder who settles in without asking. This kind of person doesn't enter your life with aggression or obvious manipulation. They come in with closeness, with routine, with the phrase, "I'm already part of this house." Maybe it's a son who came back temporarily and never left. Maybe it's a friend who shows up unannounced every day, a neighbor who feels entitled to weigh in on your routine, or someone close to you who inserts themselves into your decisions as if it were their job to correct you. At first, it seems normal. You tell yourself, "They're part of my people, I've known them forever, they keep me company." But over time, you realize there's less and less space for you, that you no longer control your schedule, your silences, your moments of calm. That your home, the space you've cared for so much, has become shared territory with someone who doesn't understand the word boundary. And what hurts most is that this invasion often doesn't come from malice. It comes from habit, the habit of you always being available. You've been the pillar, the caretaker, the listener, the one who holds everything together. But if that habit goes unchallenged, it turns into abuse. The emotional intruder doesn't need to shout or demand, they just show up, stay, and expect you to adapt. And when you don't, then comes the guilt, the poisoned line. You're getting selfish. You didn't used to be like this. And there you are again, second-guessing yourself. But you're not being selfish. You're trying to reclaim your dignity. Staying stuck in this dynamic comes at a steep cost. It drains your body, your energy, and it makes you invisible in your own life. Every time you postpone a need to attend to someone else, every time you adjust your routine to fit theirs, every time you stay quiet to avoid conflict, you're giving away a piece of your vital territory. And that territory isn't a luxury, it's your right. Because if you don't protect it, no one will. And when there's no respect in your environment, what's left is a distorted version of love, one where you give and the other simply takes up space. Now, I won't lie to you. Changing this isn't easy, and I won't soothe you with pretty words. Saying set boundaries doesn't magically fix everything. Sometimes setting boundaries means losing relationships, facing conflict, dealing with discomfort. But it also means something deeper, beginning to live your life with intention. Because if you don't draw the line, you'll disappear. If you don't defend your time, you'll end up living someone else's. And if you're not the leading role in your own days, then you're giving away a power no one else should hold. The mindset you need isn't anger or revenge, it's clarity. The understanding that not everyone who loves you knows how to respect you, that not everyone who's present deserves to stay, and that you don't have to explain or justify your desire for peace. Peace isn't begged for, it's built. And to build it, you need to learn how to close the door when someone arrives with intentions that ignore your worth. If today you feel invaded, exhausted, pushed aside in your own home, don't look the other way. Don't justify it. Don't normalize it. The life you have left is not meant to be shared with those who don't value your presence. It's meant to be lived from the center of who you are, with the conviction that your time, your energy, and your space are sacred, because they are. And if you don't believe it, no one else will. After opening your eyes to the silent damage caused by the emotional intruder, it's only natural to look inward and ask yourself how things got to that point. Not with guilt, but with clarity, because what isn't confronted gets repeated. And when boundaries aren't clearly drawn, the next thing to go is your sense of identity. That's why we've reached the 6th point in this journey, and it's time to talk about the resentful ally who lives only in the past. She's not easy to spot at first because she seems like you're confident. She's the one you share stories with, the one who reminds you who hurt you, what didn't work out, what never came to be. She sits with you through long afternoons, saying things like, "I get it, the same thing happened to me," or "life was never fair to you." And without realizing it, every conversation becomes another dig into wounds that should be healing. What starts as emotional release slowly turns into a routine built entirely around pain, injustice, failure. And you, who were searching for relief, end up reliving hurts that have no place in your present. Now I want you to imagine this with absolute honesty. You're sitting in front of a mirror that doesn't show who you are today, but a frozen version of yourself, stuck in a moment from the past. Maybe the moment you were abandoned, ignored, betrayed. And that image never ages, never changes, never forgives. It watches you every day, whispering not to trust, not to try, not to bother. How much longer will you let that version of you call the shots? Because as long as you keep feeding that reflection, you'll stay trapped in a story with no ending, in a chapter that won't close, in a grief that won't heal. The resentful ally doesn't want you to heal. She wants your loyalty to the pain. And the hardest truth is that sometimes, without realizing it, you become that person. You become the one repeating the same stories, seeking comfort in shared resentment, clinging to what was as if it's the only thing that ever mattered. But resentment, when it becomes your daily scenery, stops being a shield. It becomes a prison. It doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. Staying stuck in this dynamic has consequences that don't show up right away, but they creep into your body and soul. You start losing your spark. It gets harder to imagine anything new. The present becomes dull, and the future feels like a threat. No one can hold joy beside you, because every attempt at lightness is met with another sad story. People pull away, not because they don't love you, but because they feel powerless against your fixed narrative. And you, without meaning to, feed a loneliness you later use as proof that life has failed you. But it's not life. It's the mirror you refuse to let go of. Seneca once said, "The memory of pain should not steal the joy of what we still have." But to make space for that joy, you need to let go of the past like you'd let go of something burning, not with hate, but with resolve, because your soul needs room to regenerate. And if every day you invite the same memory, the same judgment, the same complaint, no soul can withstand it. I know. It's not easy to close chapters that hurt so deeply. It's not simple to forgive when the wounds went that far. But there's a difference between remembering and living from the wound. You have the right to say, "This is where it ends. This story no longer defines me. This pain no longer represents me." Because as long as the past controls your emotions, your present will be nothing more than a hollow repetition. And you weren't born to repeat. You were born to awaken. Even if it hurts, even if it's hard, even if you have to start alone. Because what begins with you holds more power than any story that once broke you. When you've spent too long tied to the past, trapped in stories that no longer reflect who you are, surrounded by voices that keep you stuck, your soul begins to wither quietly. Not because you've lost the ability to bloom, but because you've spent too much time giving life to everything that drains you. And now we've come to the 7th point in this journey, the hardest one to face. Because it doesn't show up as an enemy. It shows up as someone who needs you. We're talking about the weary redeemer, someone who believes it's your job to save them. This kind of person comes with a sad story, a pleading look, a constant need for emotional support. They come to you like someone seeking comfort, guidance, direction, and you, with your generous heart, your life experience, your instinct to nurture, open the door. But little by little, you realize they're not looking to grow or move forward. They want to settle into your strength, drink from your clarity, live through your light. And without noticing, you go from companion to savior. You become their constant energy source, their emotional shelter, the one thing keeping them afloat. But here's the truth. You weren't born to save anyone. You were born to live truthfully. And if someone joins you on that path, let it be by walking beside you, not clinging to your back. This pattern is fueled by a dangerous illusion. believing that helping others justifies neglecting yourself, that being a good person means carrying someone else's pain like it's your own cross, that because you can, you must. But who's taking care of you while you're saving everyone else? How much of your energy, your rest, your clarity have you given to someone who doesn't want to change, only to be carried? What begins as compassion ends in exhaustion, and a tired soul doesn't bloom. It survives, it drags, it repeats. There's no room here for sweet excuses. If you keep holding up someone who refuses to grow, it's not out of love, it's out of fear of being alone, attachment to an identity that no longer serves you, guilt from old stories you haven't released. And if you don't face it, you'll keep losing precious years trying to fill a bottomless well. No one has the right to make you their emotional crutch, and you are not obligated to be anyone's foundation. Now is the time to look at your life with complete honesty, not as a victim, but as the author, because every person who drains you today is there with your permission. Every story that keeps repeating has your signature on it, not to blame you, but to give you back your power. Nothing will change until you decide to change, until you dare to close the door, to say enough, to choose yourself. And yes, that's hard. But what's even harder is looking back in a few years and realizing you were everything to everyone, except true to yourself. What comes next won't be instant peace. It'll be confrontation, decision, discomfort. But it will also be the start of a life where every connection you have is chosen, not imposed, where every space you inhabit is truly yours, not shared out of obligation, and where every day you live is rooted in one clear truth: the dignity of having said no when your soul couldn't take it anymore. Because in the end, there's no greater redemption than stopping the habit of saving others, so you can finally begin to rescue yourself. If you've made it this far, it's no coincidence. Not everyone stays until the end of a message like this, because what you've heard today isn't comfort, it's not a pat on the back, it's not a self-help formula, it's a mirror. And facing what hurts, what drains you, what you've allowed for years, is no easy task. But if you've done it, it means you're at a point in your life where you no longer want to justify what's stealing your energy or sugarcoat what's weakening you. This video wasn't a warning about others. It was a call to your own awareness to make a decision that can't wait any longer. Live with clarity or keep surviving among people who don't respect your space, your peace, or your process. To those who've made it to this point, I see you. Because sitting through uncomfortable truths without tuning out, without running, without getting distracted, that takes courage, and you have it. That's why I want to ask you for something specific. Leave the phrase, "My space is sacred," in the comments and tell me which country you're watching from. That way I'll know you're committed to your own awakening and that this wasn't just another video in your day. It was an inner declaration that you're no longer willing to lose yourself in others. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden, a space that's not here to entertain or soothe you, but to help you reclaim your direction. Here we speak with conviction, because respect isn't begged for and peace isn't negotiable. If this voice helps you reflect, if this perspective shakes you but also strengthens you, I invite you to subscribe right now. Not to follow me, but to become part of a community that's chosen to wake up. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a friend, a sister, a mother, share it. Sometimes a single sentence said at the right moment can mark the beginning of a whole new life. This isn't the end. There's much more to reflect on, to question, to transform. Stay and watch one of the 2 videos that will appear on the screen, because what you're going through now is just the beginning of a path that, if you choose it, can lead you back to yourself. We're still here with truth, with direction, with respect, because your life still has so much left to say.